She walked out without a word and built a new life with another man. 2 years later, I ran into her at the mall, and the baby in that stroller stopped me cold. The math didn't add up. Then a letter arrived in a raccoon envelope that blew my entire world apart. My name is Francis Whitaker. I'm 43 years old. I work as an industrial equipment technician for a mid-sized manufacturing plant outside of Columbus, Ohio. I've spent 20 years learning how machines work, how to find the fault, trace it back to the source, fix it before the whole system goes down. Funny thing is, I never applied any of that logic to my own life until it was too late. Beverly and I met when I was 27. She was 20, waitressing at a diner near the plant, and she had this laugh that you could hear from across a parking lot. We dated 2 years, got married, bought a house on Delwood Drive. For a while it was good. Not perfect, nothing is but solid. The kind of life you build with your hands, and your paycheck, and your word. Then it wasn't. Looking back, I can tell you the exact moment I should have started paying attention. It was a Tuesday in November, about 3 years into the marriage. Beverly came home from her book club smelling like cigarette smoke, and Beverly didn't smoke. I asked her about it, and she said Kristen, her friend, had started up again. I nodded. I moved on. I filed it away in that drawer in the back of my head. There were other things. Late returns. New perfume. A second phone, she said, was for work. I'm not a stupid man, but I was a loyal one, and sometimes loyalty makes you blind on purpose. She left on a Wednesday. No argument. No warning. Just a note on the kitchen counter, and her wedding ring sitting on top of it like a period at the end of a sentence. The note said she needed more. That she was sorry. That she hoped I'd understand someday. I didn't understand then. I don't fully understand now, 2 years later. But I've stopped needing to. What I'm about to tell you started on a regular Saturday in March. I had gone to the Eastfield Mall to pick up a microwave. Mine had died that morning, and I was in the mood for another evening of cold leftovers. The parking lot was packed, some sale going on at the anchor store, and by the time I got inside, I was already irritated. I grabbed the microwave from the electronics section, paid for it, and was cutting through the food court to get back to the exit. That's when I saw her. Beverly was standing at one of those smoothie kiosks near the fountain, her back to me. She was pushing a stroller, bright yellow, with little rubber duck prints along the side. The baby inside was asleep. Small hands, round cheeks, a little knit hat. My feet stopped moving before my brain gave the order. For a second I just stood there, holding a microwave box like an idiot, watching the woman I used to share a bed with order a smoothie like it was any other Saturday. She hadn't noticed me yet. I thought about turning around. I should have. Instead I stood there, rooted to the spot, unable to look away. Then she turned. The moment her eyes found mine, everything on her face went still. The easy smile she'd been wearing for the smoothie guy gone. The color drained out of her cheeks, so fast I thought she might go down right there on the tile floor. Her lips stopped moving midward. She looked like a woman who had just watched a wall fall toward her and had nowhere to run. I looked at the stroller. I looked at her. I stepped forward. "Is that his kid?" I asked. My voice was quieter than I expected. Beverly didn't answer. She gripped the stroller handle and glanced around like she was calculating exits. "Beverly." I kept my voice level. "I asked you a question." "Francis, this isn't the place." "You made the place," I said, "the second you walked in here." She looked away, jaw tight. The baby stirred but didn't wake. I studied the small face for a moment, and then I looked back at her. 2 years, I said. Not a single word. "And now you're standing in our mall with his baby in a yellow stroller, ordering a smoothie with extra chia. So yeah, I'm asking." She said nothing. And somehow, that silence answered everything. I picked up the microwave box, turned, and walked toward the exit. I didn't run. I didn't raise my voice. I just left. Because some questions don't need words. And some answers are written all over a woman's face when she thinks she's already gotten away clean. She hadn't. I made it about 40 feet before I heard her voice behind me. "Francis, wait." I kept walking. Past the pretzel stand, past the sunglasses kiosk, past a group of teenagers blocking half the corridor with their stroller of a different kind. One of those massive double-wide things. I sidestepped them, adjusted the microwave box under my arm, and kept moving toward the exit doors. "Francis, please." She was following me. I could hear the quick tap of her boots on the tile, the faint squeak of the stroller wheels. I pushed through the glass doors into the gray March afternoon. Cold air hit my face. The parking lot was damp. It had started drizzling while I was inside. That thin, miserable kind of rain that doesn't have the decency to be a real storm. I stopped under the overhang. Not because I wanted to talk. Because I wasn't going to let her chase me through a parking lot in the rain and call that closure. She came through the doors, breathing hard, one hand still on the stroller. The baby was awake now, blinking at the gray sky with a mild, unbothered expression. Beverly looked at me the way a person looks at something they broke and aren't sure they can put back together. "I didn't know you still came here," she said. "It's a public mall, Beverly." She flinched. "Good. I wasn't trying to," she started. "I know exactly what you were trying to do," I said. "You were trying to live your new life without running into your old one. Today, that didn't work out." She looked down at the stroller handle, picking at the edge of the rubber grip. The rain tapped steadily on the overhang above us. I waited. I'd gotten good at waiting. 2 years of unanswered questions will teach you patience you never asked for. "His name is Jack," she finally said, quietly, like she was confessing something in church. Something moved in my chest. I didn't let it show. "How old?" 22 months. I did the math without meaning to. 22 months put his birth back to before she left. Before the note on the counter. Before the ring on the coffee table. I kept my face still. "So, you were already—" "I didn't know," she said fast. "Not when I left. I found out after." "And Holden?" She nodded. "Once. Barely." I set the microwave box down on the ledge beside me and looked at her straight. "You left me for a man, Beverly. You had his baby. You didn't call, didn't write, didn't give me a single word for 2 years. And now you're standing here telling me you didn't know." I let that sit for a second. "I'm supposed to do what with that?" "I'm not asking you to do anything," she said. I saw you and I didn't want it to end like that. In there. Like that. It ended 2 years ago. On a Wednesday. With a note." She flinched again. "I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to be accurate. There's a difference, even if it doesn't always feel like one. You always did that," she said quietly. "Made everything sound so final." "One of us had to," I replied. "You specialized in leaving things open." She looked up then, and for a second her eyes were sharp. The old Beverly, the one with an answer for everything. But whatever she was going to say, she swallowed it. The baby started fussing, a low grumbling sound that was working its way toward a real complaint. She reached into the stroller and adjusted his blanket without looking away from me. I watched her hands. Automatic, practiced. She'd been doing this a while. "He looks healthy," I said, because I'm not heartless, and because it was true, and because I needed to say something that wasn't an accusation. "He is," she said softly. "He's a good baby." I nodded, picked up the microwave box. The rain had picked up a little, spattering off the concrete in front of us, running in thin lines down the overhang's edge. "I'm glad he's healthy," I said. "I mean that. But Beverly, we're done talking for today. You want to say something real, you know how to reach me. You've always known." I stepped out from under the overhang into the drizzle. She didn't follow this time. I could feel her watching me cross the parking lot. I didn't look back. Not once. But sitting in my truck with a microwave in the passenger seat and the rain streaking down the windshield, I sat there for 5 full minutes without starting the engine. Because something she'd said was doing math in my head that I hadn't asked for. 22 months. And she'd left 25 months ago. 3 months. The gap was 3 months. I stared at the rain and tried very hard not to think about what that meant. I failed completely. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on top of the covers in the dark, fully dressed, staring at the ceiling fan that wobbled slightly on every third rotation. I meant to fix that for 2 years. Hadn't gotten around to it. There's a metaphor in there somewhere, but I was too tired to chase it. 22 months. 25 since she left. 3 months in between. I ran the numbers so many times they stopped meaning anything. Then they'd reassemble and mean everything all over again. Around 3 a.m. I got up, made coffee I didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table until the sky outside the window went from black to gray. Arthur called me Sunday morning. Arthur Fuller, my oldest friend, 46 years old, divorced father of 2, the kind of man who tells you what you need to hear and not what you want to. We'd known each other since the plant. He could hear something off in my voice before I'd finished saying hello. "You sound like a man who found something he wasn't looking for," he said. I told him about them all. About Beverly. About the stroller and the math and the 3-month gap. He was quiet for a moment, The particular quiet of a man who's been through his own version of this and knows exactly where the floor drops out. You need to know for certain, he said finally. Everything else comes after that. He was right. He usually was. The letter arrived on Tuesday. No return address. Shoved inside a torn greeting card sleeve. Cartoon raccoons on the front, the kind you find in a dollar store clearance bin. My name was written on the envelope in her handwriting, that slanted print she'd always used. I stood at the mailbox for a full minute before I opened it. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten on notebook paper. She'd pressed hard with the pen in some places, light in others, like her certainty kept shifting as she wrote. The first line stopped me cold. I need to tell you something I should have said before I walked out that door. She wrote that when she left, she was already 3 months pregnant. She wrote that she hadn't been sure whose it was. She wrote that Holden had pushed for the baby, had wanted the idea of a family, and that when she told him there was a possibility, he'd said they'd raise Jack as his and never speak of it again. She'd agreed. She'd convinced herself it was his because it was easier than the alternative. She wrote, "But I've looked at that boy every single day for 22 months, and I can't keep pretending I don't see what I see." I had to put the letter down. I walked to the kitchen sink, ran cold water over my wrist the way my mother taught me when I was a kid and couldn't calm down. Then I went back and finished it. The rest was a tangle of guilt and justification. She hadn't wanted to hurt me. She'd been scared. Holden had started drinking more lately. Things weren't what she'd imagined. She closed with, "I'm not asking you for anything. I just thought you deserved to know. I'm sorry it took me this long." I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the raccoon envelope, set it on the table like it might detonate. Then I called Arthur back. "Get a lawyer," was the first thing he said. "Before you do anything else. Before you call her. Before you confront him. Before you even buy a test. Get a lawyer and know where you stand." "I just want to know if he's mine," I said. "I know," Arthur said, "but knowing isn't enough. You need to be protected when you act on it." He was right again. I found Patricia Holt through a referral. Family law attorney, 52 years old, sharp enough to cut glass, and not interested in hand-holding. She had me in her office by Thursday. I laid everything out, the timeline, the letter, the math. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, she folded her hands on the desk. "Here's where you stand," she said. "If that child is biologically yours, you have rights. But biological paternity alone doesn't hand you anything automatically. The courts look at intent, consistency, and stability. Which means from this moment forward, every move you make is part of your record." She looked at me steadily. "Are you prepared for this to take time?" "I've had 2 years of practice waiting," I said. She almost smiled. "Then let's start." I sent Beverly one text that evening. No preamble, no emotion. "We need to meet. In person. Just the 2 of us. No Holden." The response took 4 hours. 3 words. When and where. We met at Riverside Park. Neutral ground, public enough that neither of us could make a scene without an audience, private enough to actually talk. I got there early and sat on a bench near the walking path. November oak leaves were plastered to the concrete from the last rain. A dog walker passed. A jogger. The ordinary world going about its business. Beverly arrived 7 minutes late. She was wearing her old navy jacket, the one with the brass buttons, and no makeup. She looked tired in a real way, not a performed way. She sat on the far end of the bench and set her bag between us like a boundary marker. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't," I replied. Then I remembered I'd been straight with you our entire marriage, and I wasn't about to stop now. She nodded, looking at the path. "I want a DNA test," I said. "No build-up, no softening. I want it done properly, through a lab, with documentation." Beverly exhaled slowly. "I knew you'd say that." "Then this conversation is going well so far," I said. She looked at me sideways, that old reflex, almost a smile, gone before it could form. "Holden doesn't know I wrote to you. That's between you and Holden. He's going to be. Beverly." I kept my voice quiet and even. "I understand this is complicated for your household, but I'm not here to manage Holden's feelings. I'm here because there is a boy who may be my son, and if he is, I'm going to be in his life. That's not a negotiation." She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached in her bag and pulled out a small photograph, a Polaroid. Jack, sitting on a rug somewhere, holding a wooden block in both hands, grinning at whoever was behind the camera. His hair was light brown. His eyes were wide and gray. She held it out to me. I took it. I looked at it for a long time, without speaking. "You see it," Beverly said, quietly. Not a question. I did. I wasn't going to admit it out loud. Not yet, not here, but I saw it. The shape of the brow, the way the ears sat, small things that don't mean anything on their own and mean everything together. "I see a little boy," I said carefully, "which is exactly why I need the test." She pulled her coat tighter. "And if it comes back the way we both think it might, then I'll tell you what happens next," I said. "And it'll be fair. But it won't be invisible. I won't be invisible." She stared at the path. A long pause. "He called me controlling," she said abruptly. "Holden. He told his mother that I was difficult, that I suffocated him." She laughed. A short, hollow sound. Sound familiar? I looked at her. "You told your sister I was controlling during the divorce process. You told your friend Kristen I was emotionally unavailable. I heard it through people. You were rewriting things, Beverly, while the ink on the papers was still wet." She opened her mouth. "I have documentation," I said. "My attorney has documentation. I'm not bringing it up to fight you. I'm bringing it up so you understand that I'm not the same man who stood in this city with a note in his hand and no idea what hit him. I've had 2 years to get organized." Beverly looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something shift behind her eyes. Not fear exactly, more like the recalibration of someone who had assumed the coast was still clear and just realized it wasn't. "Do the test," I said. I stood, picked up my jacket from the bench. "Let it tell us what it tells us, and then we'll both know where we stand." I left her sitting there with the Polaroid on the bench between us. Patricia called me that evening. "How'd it go?" "She'll cooperate," I said. "Good." A pause. "You doing all right?" I thought about the photo. The gray eyes. The shape of the brow. "Ask me again in 2 weeks," I said. Patricia had warned me that waiting was the hardest part. She'd said it the way someone says it when they've watched 100 people go through the same thing. Not unkindly, just factually. The results take 10 to 14 business days. During that time, most people convince themselves of every possible outcome at least twice. Try not to. I tried. I failed. The first 3 days were manageable. I went to work, ran diagnostics on a press line that had been throwing errors, replaced 2 hydraulic seals on a conveyor system. Physical work. Useful work. The kind that keeps your hands busy and gives your brain something real to chew on. I was good at it, and being good at something, even a small thing, matters more than people admit when everything else is uncertain. Arthur came by Tuesday evening with a 6-pack and a bag of pretzels and didn't ask me a single question about the test. We watched a game, talked about nothing important, and he left at 9:30 without making a production of it. That's what a good friend does. Shows up without a script. By day 5, the composure started fraying at the edges. I found myself in the kitchen at midnight, laptop open, going down rabbit holes I had no business in. Forums full of men in the same position. Some who'd gotten the answer they hoped for, some who hadn't. All of them sounded like they'd been through something that changed the shape of them. I read for 2 hours and closed the laptop, and felt worse than when I'd opened it. Day 6, a coworker named Ted, mid-50s, bad back, good heart, pulled me aside during lunch break. "You've been somewhere else all week," he said. "You don't have to tell me what's going on, but whatever it is, you're handling it wrong by trying to handle it alone." I almost brushed him off. Instead, I gave him the short version. He listened. Then he said something I didn't expect from Ted, who was generally a man of 4 words or fewer. My old man never fought for me when he had the chance. I was 18 before I found out he even could have. I never forgave him for giving up. He looked at me steadily. "Don't give that kid someone to not forgive someday." I drove home thinking about that. Parked in the driveway and sat there. Day 7, I Googled apartments in Denver. Got as far as filtering by price before I shut the browser. Running wasn't the answer. I knew that. But knowing something and feeling it are 2 different countries. Day 9, Beverly texted. Not about the test. She didn't mention it. She texted to say that Jack had a low fever and she wanted me to know just in case. I sat with that for a long time. Just in case. In case he was mine. She was already hedging toward a reality she hadn't confirmed yet. I texted back 2 words. Keep me updated. Because I wasn't going to be a stranger to my own son's fever. Not if I could help it. Day 12. The envelope came. I've been checking the mail every day like it owed me something. That afternoon, I saw the lab's return address in the top left corner, and my hands went still. I walked back inside. set it on the kitchen table, sat down across from it. I thought about getting Arthur on the phone first, decided against it. This moment was mine alone. I opened it. The language in those reports is clinical, purposefully stripped of emotion. Probability of paternity. Statistical analysis. Reference numbers I didn't understand. But the conclusion at the bottom of page 2 was clear enough. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. I put the paper down flat on the table, smoothed the fold with my palm, looked at it. Jack was my son. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. What I felt was harder to name than that. Something between grief and gravity. Like the ground had shifted 2 inches, and I was recalibrating my balance. My son had been alive for 22 months. He'd had a fever last week. He had gray eyes and a light brown cowlick at the back of his head. And I had been nowhere. Not because I chose to be nowhere. Because nobody told me I had somewhere to be. I picked up my phone and called Beverly. No answer. Called again. Nothing. I drove to the address I still had on file. The one Arthur had quietly confirmed was current, 3 months back, just in case. The house was a tan rental on a quiet street. Holden Sloan's truck was in the driveway. I knocked. Holden opened the door. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Heavier in the face, softer somehow, like something in him had been slowly deflating. He wasn't surprised to see me. That was the first thing I noticed. He leaned against the door frame and crossed his arms and waited. "Beverly's not here," he said. "Then you and I are going to talk," I replied. He studied me for a moment. Then he stepped aside. We stood in the kitchen. He didn't offer me a seat. I didn't ask for one. The house smelled like takeout and something vaguely damp. A load of laundry left in the machine too long. Maybe. A baby's plastic cup sat on the counter. A small pair of shoes by the back door. "I know why you're here," Holden said. He poured himself a glass of water and didn't offer me one. "Beverly told me she sent the letter." "When?" "3 days after she sent it." He set the glass down. "She felt guilty. She always feels guilty after she does something she should have done sooner." I looked at him. "You knew. Before the letter. Before the test. You knew." He didn't deny it. He looked at the window above the sink, jaw working. "She told me before he was born. Said she wasn't 100% sure. I told her we'd raise him as mine and move forward. And you decided for both of you that I didn't need to know." "She decided," he said. I agreed. "That's not a meaningful difference," I said. "You had information about my son, and you sat on it for 22 months. He turned to face me then, and I expected anger, something hot and defensive. What I got instead was something duller. "You want me to say I'm sorry? I want you to understand what you did," I said. "You didn't just lie to me. You made a decision for a child who had no vote in it." Holden leaned back against the counter. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "You think this has been easy?" "I think that's not my problem," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that landed harder than I expected. "I changed his diapers at 3 in the morning. I sang to him when he couldn't sleep. I drove to the emergency room at midnight when he had a reaction to something he ate. You want to walk in here with a piece of paper and tell me that doesn't count?" I let him finish. Then I said, "It counts. I'm not taking that from you. But you made yourself his father by keeping me from being one. Those aren't the same thing." Something in his face shifted. Not quite acknowledgement. More like the beginning of it. "Beverly's different now," he said. "Since he was born. I thought it would bring us together. It didn't." He picked up the water glass and set it down without drinking. "She's been talking to someone else. I don't know who. I've seen the messages, but not the name." That landed. Not because I was surprised. I'd suspected as much from things Arthur had picked up, but because of the specific, hollow way Holden said it. Like a man who had traded one lie for another and was only now doing the accounting. "Then you understand," I said quietly, "what it feels like to be the last one to know something that everyone else already accepted." He looked at the floor. Said nothing. "I'm not here to destroy what Jack has with you," I said. "He knows your face. He knows your voice. I understand that. But I have a DNA result, an attorney, and every intention of being in my son's life in a real and legal way. The question is whether we do this cooperatively or through a court that will make the decisions for all of us." Holden said nothing for a long moment. Then, "What do you want?" "Access," I said. "Regular, documented, consistent access. Arranged through my attorney in Beverly. No interference, no games. I want to be part of his life. Not to take him from anyone, but because he's mine and he deserves to know that. He looked at me for a long time. His shoulders dropped slightly. Not surrender. More like a man putting down something heavy he'd been carrying in the wrong direction. Talk to Beverly, he said finally. I intend to, I said. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. Man to man. I walked back through the hallway, past the small shoes by the door, and let myself out. On the drive home, I called Patricia. I spoke with him, I said. How'd it go? He's not going to fight it, I said. At least not today. Good, she said. Because I filed the initial paternity acknowledgement this morning. The clock is officially running. I merged onto the highway. The city spread out in the last light of the evening. Jack was 22 months old. I'd already missed too much. I wasn't going to miss another day if I could help it. Patricia moved fast once I gave her the green light. Within 48 hours of my visit to Holden's house, she had filed a formal petition for paternity acknowledgement and parental rights establishment in Franklin County Family Court. She called me the morning after to walk me through what came next. Beverly will be served within the week, she said. At that point, she has 30 days to respond. Based on your conversation with Holden, I don't anticipate a contested paternity claim. The DNA result makes that a losing position for her. What she may contest is the scope of your access and the parenting arrangement. What does that look like? I asked. It looks like a hearing, she said, in front of a judge who will evaluate both parties and make a determination based on the best interests of the child, which means your conduct from this point forward matters. Everything you say, everything you do, every text message you send, it's all part of your record. I told her I understood. She said good, and that she'd schedule a prep session for the following week. Beverly called me 2 days after being served. She wasn't angry, or if she was, she'd buried it under something more tactical. She wanted to meet without attorneys. I told her that wasn't going to happen. She said I was making this harder than it needed to be. I told her she'd had 22 months to make it easy and had chosen differently. The hearing was set for a Thursday morning, 6 weeks out. I used those 6 weeks the way Patricia told me to, documenting everything, keeping records, staying clean. No confrontations with Holden. No inflammatory texts. Just showing up, doing my job, and being the man I'd always been. Arthur kept me accountable. He called every few days, not to ask for updates, but just to check that I was eating and sleeping and not doing anything stupid. The waiting is a test, he told me once. Not of your patience, of your character. They're going to look at who you were during this period. Make sure they like what they see. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, the particular stillness of a room where too many hard things had been decided. Beverly sat at the opposite table with her attorney, a younger man named Fitch who kept shuffling papers. Patricia sat beside me, relaxed in the way of someone who had been in this room 100 times and knew exactly how the furniture was arranged. The judge was a man named Howard Garrett, late 50s, silver-haired, a face that had settled into a permanent expression of careful attention. He reviewed the filings, asked several procedural questions, and then leaned back in his chair and looked at Beverly's attorney. Counselor, he said, the paternity result is unambiguous. Is your client contesting the biological finding? Fitch stood. No, Your Honor. We're not contesting paternity. We're requesting that the court consider the established bond between the child and the mother's current partner and weight any parenting arrangement accordingly. Judge Garrett nodded slowly. Then he looked at me, directly, the way a man looks at another man when he's taking a real measure. Mr. Whitaker, you filed for legal recognition and regular parenting time. Is that the extent of your petition at this stage? Patricia nudged me slightly. I stood. Yes, Your Honor. I'm not here to disrupt Jack's life. I'm here to be part of it. Consistently. Legally. As his father. The judge held my gaze for a moment. Then he wrote something on the document in front of him. I found out later, from Patricia, who had her sources, that Judge Garrett had raised 2 kids largely on his own after his own divorce 15 years prior. He didn't let it influence his rulings. But he listened to fathers differently than some judges did. Not with extra sympathy, with extra attention. The first ruling went in my favor. Provisional parenting time, every other weekend, with a structured review at 90 days. Beverly's attorney tried to attach conditions. Patricia dismantled each one calmly and with documentation. The session was over in 90 minutes. Outside on the courthouse steps, Patricia allowed herself a small, satisfied look. 90 days, she said. You perform well during those 90 days, and we go back in there and ask for more. Standard midweek visit, holidays, the whole structure. And Beverly? She can make this smooth, or she can make it difficult, Patricia said. Either way, the outcome is the same. It just determines how much it costs her. I drove home with a provisional order on the passenger seat. Stopped at a hardware store on the way. Bought paint. A soft gray blue, the kind you'd use in a kid's room. I didn't have a kid's room yet, but I was going to. 3 weeks after the first hearing, Beverly called me on a Sunday evening. I almost didn't answer. I let it ring 4 times, then picked up because not answering felt like the kind of small cowardice I'd committed too many times during the marriage. Holden lost his job, she said. No greeting, no preamble. I waited. We're 2 months behind on rent, she continued. I've been picking up extra shifts, but it's not, she stopped. Jack needs stability. I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for him. I sat with that for a moment. The old version of me. The one who filed things away in a back drawer and explained inconvenient facts away, might have either written a check out of reflex or said no out of spite. I was neither of those men anymore. Here's what I'm going to do, I said. I'm going to set up a trust account in Jack's name. Every month I'll deposit money into it. Enough to cover his portion of rent, food, and medical. The account will be managed by a third party designated by my attorney. You can draw from it for Jack's documented expenses. Holden has no access to it. Not a dollar. Silence on our end. You're going to ask why I'm not just writing you a check, I said. The answer is that I don't trust that a check goes where it needs to go. This way, Jack gets the money. That's the only version of this I'm willing to do. Francis, that's a lot of conditions. Those aren't conditions, I said. Those are terms. There's a difference. A condition implies I might change my mind. A term is just how it works. Another pause. Then, quietly. Why are you doing this? After everything. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it because that boy has my blood in my name, and he deserves stability regardless of the decisions the adults in his life have made. Don't mistake it for forgiveness. She didn't respond to that. After a moment, she said she'd have her attorney look at the arrangement. That's the right call, I said. Have them call Patricia. I hung up and called Arthur. He answered on the 3rd ring, and when I explained what had just happened, there was a pause and then a short, dry laugh. You just turned her ask into a legal instrument, he said. That's cold, brother. It's not cold, I said. It's clean. Jack eats and has a roof. Holden doesn't get to drink my money. Beverly learns that I'm not a soft touch anymore. Everybody understands the new order of things. Arthur was quiet for a second. How are you actually doing with all of this? Ask me when I've had Jack for a full weekend, I said. He seemed to understand that was the only honest answer I had. Patricia set up the trust within 10 days. The arrangement was airtight, documented expenses only, receipts required, quarterly reports. Beverly's attorney reviewed it, came back with 2 minor modifications. Patricia accepted one and declined the other, and it was signed by the end of the week. The first weekend, I had Jack fell on a Saturday in early May. Beverly dropped him off at my place at 9 in the morning. She stood on the front porch with him on her hip, 23 months old now, wearing a small denim jacket and holding a stuffed rabbit, and she looked at the house like she was memorizing something. I stood in the doorway. He likes the rabbit, she said. Don't let it out of his sight, or he'll let you know about it. Noted, I said. She passed him to me. His weight was real and warm and completely disorienting. He looked at me with wide gray eyes, not afraid, just assessing. The way a small person looks at a new place and decides whether it's safe. Hey, Jack, I said quietly. He said nothing, reached out and grabbed my collar with one fist. Beverly went back to her car without looking back. I stepped inside and closed the door. Arthur was in the kitchen, putting together a simple lunch he'd offered to help with. Gloria, my mother, who had driven up from Chillicothe the night before and slept in a guest room and tried very hard not to make a big deal of any of it, was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of iced tea, doing a crossword puzzle and pretending she wasn't watching the front door. The moment I walked in with Jack, she set down the puzzle. She looked at the boy for a long moment. Jack looked back at her with the same calm, evaluating expression he'd given me. Then Gloria set down her tea, pushed back her chair, and said in the steady voice of a woman who had waited long enough, "Come here, sweetheart. I'm your grandma." Jack studied her for 3 full seconds. Then he leaned toward her with his arms out. She held him, and something in the room shifted, the way air shifts when a window finally opens after a long winter. Arthur turned back to the sandwiches. I leaned against the door frame and watched my mother hold my son for the first time. I thought about 22 months, about all the Saturdays that had passed without this in them. Then I pushed off the door frame and went to help Arthur with lunch. Because the past was the past, and there was a boy at the kitchen table who needed feeding. The 90-day review came on a Tuesday morning in late July. Patricia had me at her office at 7:30 to go over the file one more time before we walked into the courthouse. She spread the documentation across the conference table: visit logs, text exchanges, the trust account statements, Jack's medical receipts, 24 timestamp photos from my weekends with him. Evidence of presence. Evidence of consistency. Evidence that I had shown up every single time I said I would. Beverly's attorney will argue for the status quo, Patricia said, sliding a highlighted page toward me. He'll frame any expansion of your time as disruptive to the child's routine. Our counter is simple. The child has adapted well, the existing arrangement has been conflict-free, and the father has been exemplary. We ask for the midweek visit and the holiday schedule. Garrett, will look at the 90-day record and make a call. What's your read? I asked. She allowed herself the smallest possible smile. I think Judge Garrett is going to give you what you asked for. She was right. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. Beverly sat at the opposite table, looking like a woman who had decided to stop fighting a tide she couldn't turn. Fitch made his arguments. Patricia made hers, calmly and with documentation for every single point. Judge Garrett asked me 3 questions directly: how I structure my weekends with Jack, how I handled the logistics of his routine, what my plan was for the midweek visit in terms of childcare and schedule. I answered all 3 without hesitation, because I had thought about all 3 extensively, because that's what you do when you actually intend to show up. Garrett approved the expanded arrangement. Every other weekend, a Wednesday evening visit each week, alternating Thanksgiving, and a split Christmas schedule. He also added 1 line to the order that Patricia later told me was unusual, a notation that the father had demonstrated consistent and documented involvement, and that any future modifications to the arrangement should take that record into account. In plain terms, I had built a case for myself by simply doing what I said I was going to do. Imagine that. Beverly caught me on the courthouse steps afterward. Her attorney was still inside. She walked up alone, hands in her jacket pockets, and she looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her in years, something unguarded and a little raw. He asked about you last Wednesday, she said. Jack. He pointed at the door when it was almost time for you to pick him up and said just that 1 syllable. But he knew. I held that for a moment. Thank you for telling me, I said. She nodded, looked at the street. I know I don't get to ask you for forgiveness. I'm not asking. I just want you to know that I see what you're doing for him. And you're a good father, Francis. I know, I said, not arrogantly, just factually, because I didn't know, and I was done performing humility for people who had mistaken it for weakness. She went back inside. I walked to my truck. On the drive home, I called Arthur. He answered with, well, midweek visit, alternating holidays, full expanded schedule, I said. There was a pause. Then Arthur said, very quietly, good, real good, brother. I got home, changed out of my jacket, and spent the rest of the afternoon converting the spare bedroom. Gray-blue paint. A small bookshelf I'd assembled the week before. A bed frame I'd picked up at a second-hand store and repainted white. I'd ordered a dinosaur print comforter that was due to arrive Thursday. Not because Jack would notice the details at 23 months old, but because the details would be there when he was old enough to notice, and I wanted them to already be right. Holden moved out of Beverly's rental 3 weeks later. Arthur told me, not because he was keeping tabs on the situation, but because the town was the size it was and information moved through it whether you wanted it to or not. Beverly was managing alone. She'd picked up a better shift schedule at the medical office where she worked. She wasn't asking me for anything beyond what the trust account already provided. I respected the distance. It was cleaner that way. What I did not respect, and what Patricia documented immediately, was the attempt Holden made in late August to file for what he called established parental rights based on his 22 months with Jack. It was a long shot legally, and Patricia told me so, but it wasn't nothing. A man who had knowingly withheld paternity information trying to claim parental standing through sheer elapsed time. It was the kind of move that told you everything about a person's relationship with accountability. Judge Garrett dismissed it in preliminary review. He didn't even set a hearing date. Patricia called me with the news on a Friday afternoon while I was elbow deep in a hydraulic actuator at the plant. I asked her to repeat it once, just to be sure. Then I thanked her, hung up, and went back to the actuator. Some things deserve more ceremony than that. That particular thing didn't. Jack's second birthday fell on a Saturday in October, which meant it was my weekend. Beverly and I had agreed, carefully, through our attorneys and then in a brief civil phone call, that I would host a small gathering at my place. Gloria drove up from Chillicothe again, this time with a gift bag full of things she'd been collecting since May. Arthur came with his 2 kids, who were old enough to entertain a 2-year-old by proxy. They built things with blocks, and Jack watched them with the focused intensity of someone studying technique. I made chili. I bought a cake from the bakery on 5th that had a fire engine on the top, because by that point everyone in Jack's immediate orbit knew about his relationship with anything that had a siren and flashing lights. It had started 2 months earlier. Third visit, I'd picked him up on a Wednesday, and we'd stopped at the park on the way back to my place. We were sitting on a bench while he methodically pulled leaves off a low branch when a fire truck went by on the cross street. Lights going, siren running. Jack went absolutely rigid, then pointed with his whole arm and produced a sound that wasn't quite a word but communicated with full clarity that this was the most significant thing that had happened to him in his entire life. I took him to the fire station on Henderson Avenue the following Saturday. One of the guys there, big man named Darnell, patient as anyone I'd ever met, let Jack sit in the cab of the truck while I stood below and took 17 photographs. Jack held the steering wheel with both hands and looked out the windshield with the expression of a man who had found his purpose. On the drive home, he fell asleep in the car seat, one hand still reaching slightly forward in his sleep, like he was still holding the wheel. I had framed one of those photos. It hung in his room at my house now, next to the bookshelf. Back to the birthday. The afternoon was warm for October, and we moved between inside and the backyard as the mood shifted. Gloria held Jack for a long stretch after lunch, walking him slowly around the yard and pointing at things, the oak tree, a bird on the fence, the clouds moving overhead, telling him their names and the patient. Unhurried way she had once told me mine. I watched from the back porch and felt something settle in my chest that had been restless for 2.5 years. Arthur pulled me aside near the end of the afternoon, when the little ones were starting to wind down and the adults were on their second cups of coffee. "You look different," he said. "Different how?" He considered it. "Lighter. Like you've been carrying something for a long time, and you finally set it down in the right place." I thought about that. The mail with a raccoon envelope. The 12 days. The parking lot in the rain. Beverly's face in the food court. The gray eyes in a Polaroid. The courthouse steps. The room with the gray-blue walls. "Yeah," I said. "Something like that." Before the guests left, I brought out the main gift. A red toy fire truck, big enough to be serious about, with working lights and a siren button on the roof. Jack saw it from across the room and made a sound that could only be described as reverent. He carried it to the corner of the living room, sat down with it in his lap, and spent the next 20 minutes pressing the siren button with the systematic dedication of a researcher confirming a hypothesis. Beverly came to pick him up at 5:30. She stood at the front door while I got him ready. Jacket, shoes, the rabbit he still required for any car ride. She looked at the room. The guests packing up. Gloria saying her goodbyes. Arthur's kids putting on their coats. Jack with the fire truck tucked under one arm, like he was transporting something classified. "Looks like a good day," she said. It was, I said. She took him from me at the door, truck and rabbit and all. He went willingly. He always did, because he was too young to understand that transitions between his parents represented the entire history of a year that had broken and rebuilt itself. He just knew that both places were safe. That was enough. That was everything I'd been working toward. As Beverly buckled him into the car seat, Jack looked back at the house through the window. Then he looked at me, standing on the porch. "Duh," he said, with the certainty of someone stating an established fact. Beverly glanced up at me over the roof of the car. Her expression was complicated in the way that complicated things often are, layered, a little sad, something underneath that might have been peace. She got in the car, drove away. I stood on the porch until the taillights turned the corner. Then I went inside, where Arthur was washing coffee cups at the sink and Gloria was refolding her gift bag tissue paper like it was worth keeping. "Good birthday," Arthur said, without turning around. "Yeah," I said. I leaned against the door frame and listened to the house settle around me. The ordinary sounds of people winding down a good afternoon. 2 months ago, I hadn't known what a fire truck could mean to a 2-year-old. Now I knew this particular 2-year-old's specific sound of joy, his preferred sleeping position, that he liked blueberries, but only if they were cold, that he would hand you something he loved if he decided you were worth trusting. He'd handed me a fire truck once, just for a moment, during a visit in September. Held it out with both hands and waited to see what I'd do with it. I'd held it carefully and given it back. That's the whole job, really. Hold it carefully. Give it back. Show up next time. I was going to keep showing up.